Hi folks, Clef here with a really quick, and this time I do mean quick, follow-up video to the last one I posted about creating an arch passageway using a combination of PSUB to help you create the low poly model. So a follow-up question came up on the forums about how to do that if the archway needed to be bent, and would that create artifacts. So what I've done is followed the exact same steps as in the previous video to create the PSUB arch. So if you take a look at the previous video, you can follow the process for doing this. And this is what we end up with. The only difference is I then went from a top view and performed a bend. So we got a bend going this way once we'd finished modeling the PSUB arch. And I also added a loop in here just to help it bend a little bit better around that corner. I, strictly speaking, didn't have to do that, but it helps a little bit. Okay, so let's look at the result. Here we go. We're in reflection GL shading, and we can look, and you can see it's pretty good, but there's a little bit of shading artifact happening here. Now, in the case of PSUB, that doesn't really matter because we may see some shading artifacts in the GL view that won't be there when we actually render, and that's what we care about with a PSUB object. But even so, if we do care about that in the GL view, we can come down here into the Catmull-Clark subdivision level, and I can turn it up to, say, 4, and you'll see it'll actually alter that by increasing the subdivision accuracy. It reduces, or well, pretty much eliminates that GL artifact. And again, down here we've got render level, which can be different from what you're looking at. So you could be looking at things with a very low level, like a level of 1 subdivision level, and here we're likely to see more significant GL issues. Certainly, it's pretty much faceted now. It's not subdivided at all. But we can have a completely different render level that will be used when it's actually rendered. So let's go back to 2 here and go up to 4, for example, when we render. We'll come over here to the render view. And what really matters is when we look at things in the previewer, it gives us a good idea of what it's going to look like when it actually renders. So here we've got a nice softbox environment. We can rotate that around, and you can see that we're getting very nice reflections and no artifacts on the surface. So we would be fine rendering this. And to further increase things, if we wish, under the render settings, we could also go in and ensure that adaptive subdivision is in place if we want to increase the accuracy of things like this edge. So rendered, we're good. We have really nice quality render, no problems. And when we go back to the modeling view, yeah, we can see a little bit of shading artifact again, but if we were to increase the subdivision levels for the GL view, also not a problem. So not really a concern for PSUBs. Okay, now what about the low poly? So what I've done is, just as in the previous video, I've duplicated this and froze it to create this low poly version. But unlike the previous video where we took the poly flow and steered it, sort of swooping diagonally here up to the top, and the reason for that was to avoid having this poly flow continue off the edge, which would then need to continue onto the adjacent walls. We didn't want that. We wanted to have the arch completely self-contained, just to save a few more polys out here for the low poly model. But in this case, we would have a problem with that technique, because if we have polys traveling diagonally here, we want this front face to be curving, And those long polygons traveling across this diagonally will not allow for a smooth curve, and that will indeed create artifacts, obviously, when you want to use the low poly model. So in order to maintain this bend, this curve, what we need is a whole bunch of vertical spans here, which we're seeing going across the top. All of these spans traveling across it are what are allowing us to have this nice, fairly smooth curvature. So if we're going to have these spans traveling down this way vertical, we might as well leave these edges traveling out horizontally. And in fact, this is closer to the default we get when we freeze. So all I've done here is just remove a few extra edges after the freeze. I've done nothing else. So it's actually simpler than what we had in the previous video. And as we rotate around, as you can see here, it's actually pretty clean. And even if there is some slight artifacts in Moto's GL view, that doesn't mean that you're going to have the same shading in whatever real-time engine you're using, like UDK. So whenever you're producing a low poly asset, the first rule is always to save out your model when you're done, bring it into your game engine, and look at how its shading model is working with the particular asset to see if there's any problems. But since this is an all-quad workflow, so it'll be triangulated perfectly, there shouldn't be any artifacts at all when this goes over to a gaming engine. So the only effect of this, let's take a look. So I really quickly, it's not very symmetrical, but I threw together another little ring of walls, and here I've dropped in our archway. And you can see what I've had to do here with the walls is I've created a series of edge loops traveling around it that correspond to the edge loops on the archway. So this has definitely increased our polygon count because now on each of these faces, obviously instead of just a single face, we now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 polygons, I guess, where we would have had just one before. So yeah, it's increased the poly count a little bit, but we are managing to still maintain a smoother curvature. So we can go ahead now and just bridge this in here. And on the other side, same deal. Go ahead, bridge it in. Now I've got complete model, and as you can see, it's nice and smooth and continuous. And this should work well in the real-time engine, but obviously you're going to have more polygons, and you have to decide too how many of these vertical spans do you really feel that you need? Like how faceted are you willing to let the curve become? And that's down to judgment as well. And obviously, the more of these vertical loops that we remove, the more faceted this edge is gonna become. So if I keep removing these, you can see we're going to become increasingly faceted traveling around here. But it's still possible to do some further polygon reduction depending on the look that you're trying to achieve. So there we go. Hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching.